I know, it's cool, right?
Yeah, and I'm not going to have to ask you a few times to tell me the name of your practice.
Oh, well, yeah, really. It's right there, right?
Bam.
Yep. Can't miss it.
Awesome. Well, if you wanted to just share a little bit more about the Institute and just kind of your journey as a counselor and then getting your PhD and then finding the brain health coaching course and all that fun stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I talk about really how the Institute started was understanding trauma. So my wife and daughter had experienced childhood trauma. When I met my wife, I realized very quickly that she was living in a very different household than I grew up in. She
Mm-hmm.
had a very traumatic childhood with a very angry, disturbed father. And so she was always living in fear. But she was high functioning. So if you had met her, Fallon, you would never have known it, right?
Right.
So everything looked good on the outside, but underneath, she was just always operating out of fear, always worried what was going to happen next, something's going to go wrong. And that was really coming from the way she'd grown up as a child. And when my daughter was 14, she was diagnosed with Crohn's. And then when she was 16, she told us about some abuse that she'd experienced that we didn't know about when she was younger.
Wow.
So she ended up with 4 different operations. She, through the Crohn's, multiple times taking out pieces of her intestines. And they basically said she's just going to run out of, and then end up with a colostomy bag. So my wife
Wow.
said, we really need to figure out some answers to it. My wife had done tremendous amounts of research and couldn't come up with anything except take her off of gluten, take her off of dairy. And so that really led me to start studying. And that's why I went back, got my PhD. And what I realized is what I believe was happening was that it was unresolved trauma was creating inflammation in the body.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
yep, because what happens is the trauma keeps looping. So your survival brain, your subconscious mind is operating in the present. So it is seeing stored memory that I call high resolution memory, the traumatic memory in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's responding to it as if something's still happening. It's a glitch, it's an error message. And so I started studying why is this happening? And what I realized is that we're really, the traditional method is to teach people to live, manage, and cope with it. So if you've got anxiety, we're going to give you anxiety medication. We're going to teach you anxiety um, treatments to be able to cope with it and manage it. And what I said is, why don't we just eliminate it?
Right.
And so
That male
anyway,
brain, like, let's get to a resolution, like, let's figure this out.
yep. So I came in at basically because my background has always been an entrepreneur, so it's like we have a problem, let's figure out the best way to solve the problem. So I studied a lot of different modalities that they were using and then just created our own, which we call TIP. And basically it's a 4-hour process. And what we are doing is basically resetting the brain, just like a computer. We're going to reboot it and get that high definition stored memory. The way I usually explain it is I'll ask somebody, can you tell me what you ate for dinner last night? And they'll say, well, and they'll describe it. And I'll say, you saw pictures, right, of what you ate, so maybe
Mm-hmm.
where you were eating. They'll say, yeah. And I'll say, that's how you stored the information about what you ate for dinner. But because it wasn't threatening or disturbing, it's stored as a fairly low resolution file.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that was a traumatic event, all your senses are heightened, right? Sight, smell, hearing. So how's it going to record it in memory now? Very bright, very intense. And that's what's activating the nervous system. And so the mind is trying to create a response to what it thinks is a threat now. So what we do to make it simple is we're going to get the mind to reset that high definition data into the same format as what you ate for dinner last night. And it stops calling for the action. So we're finding people were eliminating post-traumatic stress. I just worked with a veteran who was really, really struggling with it and just said, this has just been life-changing for him. So we've got lots and lots of cases of eliminating post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression. And that's what really led me, to looking at what you guys are doing at the Amen clinics as well, because I was saying, I would like to know what is actually physically happening in the brain. I know we're changing the brain. Like I know for a fact we are.
Yeah.
And so that's why I came in, took the course, because I really wanted to study what are we going to see when we calm down that nervous system and we resolve that trauma, the brain's going to settle down. So all the stuff that we see on the SPECT scans that you guys are doing, right? That's what we want to start being able to do to build up more evidence based about how much we can change the brain. So that's why we're so excited to work with you guys.
I love that. And it's so funny because every time I do this, I'm like, oh, I need to do this thing that involves me and my computer skills, which is like not great. But I have, I've had 5 scans. And the biggest difference between all the different things that I did, so supplements, hyperbaric, trauma therapy, bioidentical hormone therapy, the big difference between my scans was the trauma therapy.
Yep.
My PTSD pattern went completely away. But then I got in a bad relationship, got rescanned, and it was like, poof, there it is, coming back. So I'm like, all right, I got to go harder in therapy because I want to be able to have more resiliency. You know, biologically, you think you have resiliency, especially me. Like I have access to the supplements and hyperbaric and like all these wonderful, beautiful things that heal my brain. But if I'm not going to do the trauma work to fix my brain, now that I know how to do that, I have to do that. And it has to be the biggest priority for me now, thankfully.
Absolutely. And so by doing that, so what we have found is that we can do that in a 4-hour session. And
so easy.
Yeah, so I worked with the Boston Marathon bombing survivors, the Vegas.
Oh, wow. Bless your heart. Oh,
yeah.
I can't imagine.
And completely gone. No more post-traumatic stress. Because like I said, it's a glitch. The mind is actually, so what I say is anytime you have an emotion, a feeling, a sensation, or a thought, your mind is calling for an action. The purpose of fear is to escape a threat. The purpose of anger is to attack a threat.
Right.
So if you think about something that happened to you 5 years ago and you feel fear, what does your mind want you to do? Run 5 years ago, because it operates in real time, right?
Yeah.
Well, you can't run 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not possible, but your mind doesn't know that. So same thing for you in a relationship. What your mind is trying to get you to do is fix it. Do it differently. Don't get into the relationship. Maybe we can solve it that way.
That's what I was just thinking. I just kind of had this major, beautiful moment. So my relationship with fear has been different and healed at a biological brain level, because instead of running toward the wrong person, now I have what Dr. Amen would say is healthy anxiety, healthy fear. Now I can see the type of people that aren't, you know, emotionally safe for me. Instead of running toward them, I run away from them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the whole idea, is if it's a current threat, right, an emotion makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Where the dysfunction is coming in is if you're thinking about that old relationship and still feeling something.
Right.
Because that's not happening, but your mind is trying to do something about it.
Totally.
Right? It's amazing how our minds work. And if you don't get that resolved, then it's going to continue to loop. So for my daughter, right, she was continuously looping through the trauma as a child. So she ends up with Crohn's. Once we took her through this program, she hasn't had a Crohn's flare up. And it's been years. And so that is not traditional, because what they're going to say is, they told us Crohn's never goes away. You're going to live with it for the rest of your life. You're either going to be in remission because you're on steroids or on one of their treatments, right? Or it's going to be active. And what I said is that when we resolved the trauma, the inflammation went down. Because
I was going to say, I want to be there when you had that conversation with the doctor.
Oh, you should have heard him. What he said was, he goes, I said to him, when we resolve the trauma, we reduce the inflammation, the immune system comes back online, right?
Yeah.
Because when there's that unresolved trauma, the inflammation is a temporary response to a threat. It's not meant to stay in an inflamed state. It's basically meant to protect it while there's a current threat. As soon as the threat is over, the inflammation should go back down. And so when I told him that that's what I believe happened, he says, that's impossible. He goes, if that was true, you would have a Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, goodness gracious.
So I said to him, I says, then you tell me what Crohn's is. He says, Crohn's is a lifelong debilitating disease with no known cure. And I said, Crohn's is inflammation. And I believe the inflammation caused by the trauma. Now, is
Yeah.
that 100% of Crohn's patients? I don't know, but I certainly know a majority of the people I see have trauma, right?
Hmm.
Have autoimmune issues.
That's what I'm saying. Like, let's eliminate all of the things we know it could be while educating you that, we operate somewhere between 88 and 99% at a subconscious level.
Yep.
If you have trauma, which we all have trauma, being born is a trauma, all that stuff's being stored, especially before age 7. So let's educate people about that. The Body Keeps the Score is one of my favorite books.
Mhm.
Amon's new book comes out talking about the dragons that steal your happiness and how to tame those dragons, because we all have them. And it's so sweet. He talks about his in there too. And it just kind of makes you think of what yours is, and then also what your brain type is, and how that kind of rolls into this picture of who you are, and like what makes you special, what are your strengths, what are your vulnerabilities, and what can we reset in 4 hours. It sounds like that's so cool.
Yeah. And once it's reset, it's reset. So people say, well, how do I know it's not going to come back? And I say, because we've reprocessed it. And so basically what I'm doing is taking them from the memory has been stored basically in a beta brainwave high energy state. I keep them in a very relaxed alpha brainwave state while we're doing the therapy. So that's what happens in that first hour to an hour and a half is I'm moving them into that very relaxed, focused state. Then when we bring in the memory, right? And I only do 2 or 3 minutes of it. That's it. So it's not like we talk about it very much. In fact, I don't even at times even know what it is, because I can do it visually, right? Or I could do it if they want to talk about it, or I have them tell me in a different language and I just give them a new language to tell me. So I have no idea at times what the trauma is.
That's the beautiful thing. Do you mind saying that again? Because I feel like so many people that have been starting to listen to more about this really don't understand that.
Yeah, it's amazing, because a lot of times traditional therapy will want to go over and over a particular event, which is traumatizing. Exactly. So what I do is I say, we've got 3 ways of doing it. One, I'm going to be asking you for a 2 to 3 minute highlight description of a particular time.
Mhm.
And if you want to talk about it, that's fine, we can. While they're doing that, I'm taking them through the technique to get the mind to reset it. And I said, or I can just do it visually. So I'll have you seeing it while I still do the same thing. So I have no idea what they're seeing. Or the third one is I say, I'm going to teach a new language called flowing. And there's only one word in the flowing language, and it's flowing. So instead of saying, I walked into the room, you would say flowing, flowing, flow. Every word's flowing. The idea behind that is I have no idea what you're saying, but in order to even say flowing, you have to go into memory.
Yeah.
While you're bringing in that memory, I'm keeping you in this relaxed, focused state, and the mind just updates it. And by the time I'm finished, I'll say, okay, let's go back to that event and tell me now what it looks and feels like. And I worked with a US Army sniper who had to shoot and kill a 12-year-old boy. And I did this technique. I did a visual one with, because he said to me, he says, I can't talk about this anymore. I got arrested at the VA. He says, last week, because I started throwing tables and chairs. He says, they just kept asking me to talk about it. And so I said, I'm not going to ask you to talk about it. So by the time I finished that technique, I said, go back to it. He could then describe every detail of that event and goes, how the bleep did you just do this? And I said, I haven't done anything. What happened is that your mind for 8 years has been trying to get you not to pull the trigger. It's been calling for an action that you couldn't do. Now your mind just realized that's not real. It's not happening. So it updated. So it stops calling for the action. That's how fast and simple it is. And we do 2 or 3 events. We don't need to do any more. And the mind is so brilliant. It will then start this process throughout all the memory. So I worked with a lady who had had really terrible sexual abuse as a child. We worked on 3 different events. And then she said to me, she says, well, we're going to be here all night because I've got a lot of these. I said, we don't need to do any more. She says, well, don't we have to go through each one? And I said, no. I said, your mind tonight is going to start the updating process for you, right? When you go into a theta brainwave state, when you start to go to sleep, your mind's processing. So it's going to process what it just learned here today. So I ran into her about a month later at a store just by chance. And she came up to me and she said, I got to tell you something. She says, I was feeling great that day. There's no question that those events were not causing any distress for me. She says, but I didn't believe you when you told me everything else would get updated. She says, but I was at Universal Studios on the weekend with my daughter, and I was riding the escalator and I was looking over the railing. And she says, and my daughter said, Mom, look at what you're doing. She says, I never told you I had a fear of heights. We never even discussed that, and it's gone. So whatever event had created the fear of heights got updated too. So as you know, Fallon, the mind and body are designed to heal. All we have to do is get it set. And then the healing takes place on its own. If you come in with a broken leg and we reset your leg, right, we don't have to worry about it healing itself. It just automatically heals.
Exactly.
And I believe the same thing is with the brain.
100%.
Yeah. So it's exciting, and it's rewarding to be able to see people heal so quickly. And, it's not a great business model because I don't need to see them again. Right.
Well, I feel like that's where we're going, though, is the concept of health is wealth, investing in your health. I feel like all of that is changing and desperately needs to change. If we learned everything from 2020, it's like, what do I have control over?
Right.
Control over my body. I have control over my reactions to stress, whether it's little daily things or major political issues or a virus that is spreading. Whatever it is, what do I have control over? And what resources do I have? You have so many resources. You have so much that you can control so that things don't bother you. And it's so interesting because most people think of me as like kind and like empathic. And I mean, I definitely feel like I am, but so much of that has shifted over the past year because my tolerance for so many things is so much lower because I know what I have control over and I'm addressing it and I work on it every day. You can do the same thing. I was where you were once with much less resources. And we have people like you that are doing this work, and we have people all over the world that are doing this work virtually. You just have to get on your computer. You got to have Wi-Fi. Like, that's it.
Exactly.
Let's do it. Like, why wouldn't we want to do this? Why wouldn't we want to make ourselves better? And it's just going to spread in a positive way. We need to spread the right stuff. And that is just self-love and self-respect and all the things that go into what health really is, which kind of brings me back to body keeps the score. It's all about, what is really Crohn's, what is really ear ringing, what really is unexplained foot pain. Like, what is that? And then reflecting on that and then finding somebody to help you heal from that.
Yeah. And all that is possible, but you've been told all your life, right, that you're going to have to live with this. This is going to be a chronic condition that you're going to have to live with and manage it and cope with it. And what I'm saying is, no, I don't believe that. And especially with trauma.
Yeah. And that's what makes me so grateful, because so many people believe their doctor. And I'm like, so your doctor is an MD, DO, whatever. Yeah. Okay, good. So they didn't go to school for anything else. Like, they're a medical doctor. Yeah. Okay. So they're not a psychic.
Right.
They're not. They can't predict my future and say, this is never going to go away. You're never going to get better. It just makes me crazy, especially my dementia patients that were told that from one neurological consult.
Yes. Yep. Well, my youngest son had 3 head injuries. So he had a different problem than my daughter. Mm-hmm. But their approach was, so we had one in elementary school, one in middle school, one in high school. And on each one, we sort of saw a decline. But the one in high school really affected him. And they basically just kept saying, he's got major depression. And I said, no, he's got TBI. And they're like, no, it's major depression. And here's all the medications we're going to put him on. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to find... But do you think I could get a neurologist to write me a SPECT scan? Nope. They wouldn't do it. They're like, no, this is what we see. The insurance company won't pay for that, right? So we'll do an MRI. I said, I want a SPECT scan. I don't want an MRI. And so I worked with a couple of different people, Dr. Gimmon out of Tampa and Dr. Maxfield, and they kept agreeing. They agreed with me. So finally, what we ended up having to do was go to Louisiana to Dr. Harsh. And
Love him.
yep. And so we got him to do a SPECT scan, put him in the hyperbaric, do another SPECT scan. And he said, yep, hyperbaric is what will help him. So we have our own hyperbaric chamber now because of that. And so here in
Awesome.
Orlando. Yep. And
Did I
so,
help you with that?
no.
Okay.
So we had it a little while ago, but ever since he's gone in that, he woke up totally different. He didn't need to be medicated. He had a brain injury. So
Which
he wasn't
needed
getting enough
pressurized
brain.
oxygen. It's
Yep.
very simple.
Yep, that's simple, right? And so that's what, it's one of the best kept secrets in medicine.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because Dr. Maxfield said something I thought was brilliant. I said to him, how can you look at this and tell me that that's what he needs, and yet other radiologists, right, are looking at it and saying that it's fine? He says, because they don't know what to look for. Mm-hmm. He says, I know what to look for. He was 84 and he just said, if they don't know what to look for, they're not going to find it.
Love it.
So he could see it. And a lot of times what he says, a lot of these veterans come back and they're being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and they've got TBI.
100%. Yeah.
Because it presents like post-traumatic stress.
Have you seen Quiet Explosions yet?
No. No.
Really amazing. It's very emotional. It's kind of difficult to watch at times, but it's very informative about TBI and PTSD and the journey of functional medicine and hyperbaric oxygen and all those fun things.
Yep. So I'm a big believer in all these different things. And, I love the course, that I took with you guys. And, it just illustrates how we have to know what to look for.
Right.
Right. And that's what you guys have done, is shown if you know how to look for these things, you'll know how to treat it. But if you don't know how to look for it, you're going to treat it the way you've been trained. And so it's not that these guys, these MDs and these different people aren't smart. They're brilliant people.
Right.
Right. But if you've been trained one way, you're not going to be able to think outside that box. They have to learn so much information. It's such an overload of information that they have to learn, that you could see why it would just be overwhelming. And then somebody comes in and you've gone, well, I traditionally go this way. I've got 5 minutes to talk to you, right? I'm going to go with my best guess.
Right.
Right.
I know that's one of the cool things about a lot of our Amen Clinics doctors. A lot of them are my age. And so they get out of med school, and the few lucky ones immediately find Dr. Amen and jump into his training. They're like, I basically just went back to medical school, yep, but I'm doing it in a much condensed version. I'm not doing it for,
exactly
years.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the really cool things, is that we are getting some of these younger boots on the ground to continue changing generations, so that when they're 84, they won't have to have as many of these conversations convincing people to get a SPECT scan.
Exactly.
Because we're going to be everywhere soon. We're going to be in Fort Lauderdale at some point in the next year or two-ish. Mm-hmm. Be good, because that's only, what is that, like 3 or 4 hours from you?
Yeah, about 3 hours.
Yeah.
So you need to get to Orlando. So
you got to spread it everywhere first.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I had I haven't met them, but they came into our office, and so I was on a call. They adopted some children out of a tremendously abusive, some of the most horrific trauma you can imagine, abuse. And the oldest boy is just completely out of control. And they just want to put him into an institution, at least law enforcement do, because he's doing some really, really destructive stuff. And I just said, get to the Amen Clinic and get a SPECT scan. And this is something I think would be really good, and they did. They finally did. They went in there and got there. And I said, I can tell you exactly what is going to show up on there, right? And it did. It showed up all the things that I said we're going to see. And I said, then you just need to get a letter to be able to state to law enforcement and to the prosecutors that we can't punish this out of the kid.
Right.
We need to treat it. And if we treat it the right way, right, we can save this child. I said, this poor child is in pain. He's in tremendous pain. He doesn't know why he doesn't have this impulse control, or why he doesn't have this ability, to control his emotions. I
Right.
said, he couldn't. I said, I couldn't if I had that brain. Neither could
How old
you.
is he, Don?
13.
Oh gosh. I'm glad we got him at 13.
Yes. Yep. So hopefully that's what's going to happen. So I actually just talked to them the other day. And so I said, so get them into hyperbaric. So they live up in Indiana. That's the only problem. So they can't find anything there. So they may bring them down and use ours. So we're just trying to figure out some solutions for them. But I said, you're going to see a change in him if you can get him in the right treatment and not punishing him.
Yes, crime and treatment.
Yep.
We have more attorneys that are starting to do that. And at least I know in Georgia, we have like one judge that is helpful and really understands our process. So it's slowly a movement that I'm hoping we'll get to, especially when people start actually reading the data. That's why I was asking how old he is at 13, because, by 18, he could be in jail for significant.
Well, they're already trying to put him in jail. They're always
Yeah.
trying to put him into a institution, right?
Yeah.
Which is going to come out worse.
Exactly. And more physical trauma from fights and more emotional trauma. And if you look at the data of a lot of people that are imprisoned right now for crimes related to poor impulse control, whether it's drugs or violence or whatever, the incident of traumatic brain injury and untreated ADHD is so high. Yep. And so you think of a kid that has an abusive home, there's no way they're going to be able to focus in school. So then they just start, cutting up, as they say in the South, and then they get bad grades, and then it's like self-esteem. And then they already put this label on themselves, like, I'm the bad kid. I'm just always going to be the bad kid. And it's like, they go down this road. It's like, if we could have just scanned you and got more information when you were young and then treated you, you wouldn't have gone down this path.
Yep.
There's just, it's like a soft subject for me, because I just feel like there's so many people in prison that do not need to be there, and they could be contributing to society. And, we know with ADHD, classic ADHD, very intelligent. They have very innovative ideas. They know how to create things, and they know how to collaborate with other people because they tend to be people. Yep. And so I'm hoping that slowly gets better over time.
I think it's starting to. So we just got to keep going out there. So one of the principles that we adopt, this is what we say immediately when somebody comes in. The first thing I would say to you, Fallon, is there's nothing wrong with you, Fallon. There's nothing wrong with your mind. Your mind works perfectly fine. However, it is being affected by some events and experiences that are interfering with your ability to stay present and in the moment and perform at your highest level. So all we have to do is go in and get an update done, a reboot, right? So I said, if you you take your computer into the computer store and you say, every time I hit my M key, my computer shuts off. And so the traditional approach to that would be, if we were a computer therapist, would be, don't touch the M key.
Right.
Stay away from any words that have M in them, right? And we're just going to avoid that M key, right? And work around it. And so what I say is, no, there's a coding error. So something happens. So the M key has gotten a code to shut off the computer. So all you have to do is get the code back to what its original design was, which is to be an M. And that's all we're going to do here, is get your mind to reset it so it goes back to its original operating system. And we can do that fast. It doesn't have to be long and painful.
Right.
And we're seeing the results. We got so many people who have just changed their lives from, the most horrific traumas to also performance. So I work with athletes who want to perform at a higher level. I worked with Rob Killian, who won the world championships in Spartan after going through our program.
Cool.
Marco Cicchetto, who's a double amputee, lost both his legs. To frostbite, but he was a marathon runner. And so then they built blades for him to run on. And they said, we really think he's a potential Olympic hopeful, but he's sort of plateaued. He's not improving no matter what training we're doing. We now think it's, something he needs to do with his mind. And so I worked with him. And then 9 days later, he ran in his first marathon after the treatment I did, and he took 15 seconds per mile off his time. And then in the
Wow.
next race he ran, which was almost 2 years ago now, he won he broke the world record at the Boston Marathon for amputees. And
That's
then he broke his
amazing.
own world record by another 5 minutes at the Chicago Marathon and got signed by Nike.
Wow.
So it was in his mind, and that's what he said, was he wasn't staying present. And that's going to affect the energy in the cells.
Mm-hmm.
So if your energy is being drained because your mind is not staying present, right? So I didn't help him physically get better. I got his mind to release more energy, because that energy that the mind was using, or the brain was using, focusing on his trauma, got released. And so that made the difference. One of the most exciting one though too was Chris Nickick. I don't know if you've seen Chris. I worked with Chris. He is a 21-year-old Down syndrome young man, and his father came to me and said, we're going to train him to run a Ironman. And
Cool.
so I worked with him, and we went through the program, and he had his physical trainers as well. And just late last year, he's the first person with Down syndrome to ever run an Ironman and complete an Ironman, not just run it. He actually completed it in the proper time. It's all over the world. It's world news. You'll see it on
I'm
our
sorry.
site.
I never watch the news. I'm like so out of the loop.
I know.
But I'm going to look later, because that's really close to my heart. One of my closest friends growing up had Down syndrome, and he was an excellent swimmer. And so I was in Maine, so summer is very short, but the few months that we had swimming together was always so fun. And it always amazed me how fast he was. And just, how they have these really cool gifts, and being able to focus on brain health specifically with Down syndrome is like another thing that I'm really passionate about, because they are kind of set up to approach dementia much sooner than most people.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've seen it on a couple SPECT scans of some of my patients, and I mean, dramatic results. Like the mom of one of my patients, kind of one of those moms that gives you anxiety, like, if this doesn't work, like, I'm like, okay. I'm not the doctor, don't get mad at me. 2 weeks I called to check in on them since their scan. So he'd only been on the supplements for 2 weeks. And she said, he is a completely different person. Like, he's saying words he's never said, and he's doing things he's never been able to do independently. And I was like, this is amazing.
It's a different approach. It's such a healing approach. Chris, that was just a great story. I worked with another boy with autism who had been sexually assaulted by an older boy multiple times. And so his mom knew about us. So then I did a session for him. And then 3 days later, his therapist called me, and she says, I need to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And so I was like,
I'm busy.
Go wrong. And she says, I just met with him today. She says, it was our regular session. And she said, I just need to understand what you did. That's the biggest miracle I've ever seen.
Oh.
She says, that is not the same boy that came in. She says, when we usually end our sessions, I try to get him to give me one positive thing that I'm going to write down that we can focus on. She says, he gave me 15. The session ended right on our 15th. He was so positive. So that's an autistic. Now he's a higher functioning, autism, but still that brain was possible to heal as well. Same with Down syndrome, so what I worked on with him more with Chris was more the performance side, right? Being able to get through the pain to be able to continue running. So it's just such a great story. And there's so many people like that we can help this way. So that's why we're excited to work with you guys. I think we can do a lot together in helping people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all you're doing, and definitely offline at some point. I would love to talk about doing work like for me.
Yeah. So we'll get you through our program so you can become an advocate.
Awesome. Well, I so appreciate your time. And is there anything else you wanted to say because I mean, I would normally ask like how to find you, but we know how to find you.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Inspired Performance Institute.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if you have any questions or whatever, people can just send directly to me. Yeah. So I don't think I have any other things to say except just, you know, if you're dealing with some of these things, or people who are dealing with them, right? Let them know that there are other answers out there. They don't need
Right.
to suffer. And in
Exactly.
fact, they don't need to suffer long. So that's the thing that I see that we're doing and you guys are doing, which is changing the world, because it's a whole paradigm shift. We don't need to have people in this chronic state. We need to fix it. So I always use the analogy, if you went into your dentist and you said, I have a really bad toothache, and the dentist just takes out a needle and he numbs you and
Yeah.
then gives you a pamphlet on how to live with toothaches,
Yeah.
right? You'd say, well, no, I want you to take it out.
That's not
Or fix it.
okay.
Yeah, stop the pain,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to live with the pain.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
love that analogy. I'm going to totally take that one.
yeah, so many people live with it. And it was just my daughter and I do walks in the morning, and one of the things, this is just something that came up recently, and I said, we came back in and I looked at the pool and I said, let me just explain this. I said, if we came in and we saw the pool was down 2 feet in water, right? Now, if we thought traditionally, what we would say is we need to fill up the pool, right? I says, but the way I look at it is, where's the leak?
Love that. Yeah.
Because we can continue to keep filling up the pool, right? Or we can stop wherever the leak is and then fill up the pool. And that's really what we're doing. Totally different approach.
Well, we are so appreciative of you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys and look forward to continuing our work together.
Absolutely. Well, happy Friday. I hope you have a beautiful weekend.
Yep, you too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.